What's the first thing that pops into your mind when you think first-person shooters? I'm going to hedge a bet and say that you think about guns, right? I mean, it does make sense, it's in the name after all. But what about movement? You see, back in the day, every new shooter that had a first-person perspective was simply labeled a Doom clone. Gradual expansion and iterations on Doom's foundations came to demand a genre all of its own. And for many different titles, the innovation and evolution of the genre came not from the guns themselves, but rather how players navigated and experienced their environments. What do I mean by this? Think about it this way. 1973, Maze War. It introduced the first-person perspective alongside basic movement and shooting in a three-dimensional maze. Then, 1980s, Battlezone introduced early 3D vector graphics used for first-person cockpit view of a shooting experience. Next, Wolfenstein 3D introduced texture mapping, walls, doors, basic level layouts, and more immersive than the previous wireframes introduced in Battlezone. Then, of course, the grandfather of them all, Doom. It really established the feel of modern FPS games. Kinetic movement, responsive, and aggressive. It introduced elevated floors, lighting systems, and a new kind of pacing for the genre. Later on came one of my personal favorites, Duke Nukem 3D. It expanded on environmental interactivity and added slanted walls. Players could manipulate the world more. It introduced more complex geometry, expanded on mechanics such as lighting, doors, elevators, and the way the world reacted to the player. Then we can jump to Quake, which introduced the first 3D levels and models, using not just sprites as previous games. It had full 3D geometry and enemies. We can go on, but you can see that while we can focus on the shotgun and different weapons that were added, which, the Shrink Ray in Duke Nukem or the Super Shotgun from Doom 2, you had a lot of innovations that came from the encompassing systems, not just from shooting the guns themselves. So nearly 30 years later, what does all of this history have to do with Born to Build? As you know, we are writing our own custom engine. And one of the few benefits of that grueling process is getting to appreciate every single system that you implement. Everything that is essentially taken for granted. So, from the title, as you saw, technically, Born to Build is now playable. It has its first gameplay system, which is the movement system. So let's talk about what we came to learn from its implementation. Let's spawn our grunt in this lovely little shooting range. What can we do with the movement system so far? Well, we can move in all directions. We can collide with the terrain at 3 different body collision areas, which are the feet, the body, and the head. We can also jump and fall, and we can also clip into the ground because there's a bug. So you may have already caught on to something here. The term movement system is a tad misleading, as we can see that it requires both a physical collision system and a physics system and an input system to support what could be considered the bare minimum of a movement system. See what I'm getting at? So what's it gonna feel like to move in Born to Build? Physics. You're gonna fall like a ton of bricks, and you will take damage if you fall from a height between, let's say, 6 to 10 voxels or more. Why? Because I want the terrain and the voxels that players add into the level to be meaningful. It's easier for us to make use of height as a type of risk you'll consider, just like in real life. So if you look at this bridge, for example, you'll say, okay, I can walk through this, but if I fall, I'm gonna die. So it's really important for me as a designer, for players, to have that in the back of their minds. If I fall, it's gonna hurt, probably not worth the risk. Maybe I should consider reinforcing the bridge, finding a different route, or digging to carve a new path forward. Let's talk about the collisions. The player is around 2.65 voxels tall and is about 70% of the size of a voxel. This is still changing as I wanted to feel close to Ace of Spades. And why did I choose these values? Because while you're in a cave, that's the width of 1 voxel and the height of 3 voxels, I want you to still be able to move a little so you can get a feeling for how much space your character actually takes in the world. Hey soldiers, just quickly stopping here to tell you that even while I was editing this episode, I already went back on what I just said. You can see in the footage that, hey man, set the values to 0.4, and then when you move left and right, it just created this kind of twitchy effect. So for now, we just decided to keep it 0.5, so it still allows you to walk between passages. You shouldn't be able to move left and right, so you know how much space your body actually takes. And by the time the episode goes live, it might change again. So take all of these values with a grain of salt. It's all all going to be tested. And of course, after your feedback, it's going to change again. So just keep that in mind. All right. Finally, speed and force. You can move at a normal speed or a slower speed. You can also crouch to get into lower spaces. You can't go prone. You can't sprint. And your jumps aren't very high. Why is that? Feeling heavy is a good way to anchor you down and make you think like a soldier on a battlefield that's ever changing. If the movement system was too quick, or you could double jump above obstacles, or you could sprint through relatively dangerous areas, you will lose the entire tactical approach we had in mind for the game since day one. So now we know what the movement system is comprised of. Let's talk about how important it actually is. Just think about how many FPS games are out there and how nearly all of them feel different. I mean, the entire genre is from first-person perspective, right? We do experience our lives from that same perspective. So I do think that's what makes this genre really unique and really important to get right. Then why isn't every FPS game the same? I mean, think about it. Nearly every FPS game is different when it comes to movement. Sure, there are similarities of input, right? We all look around with the mouse. Well, you didn't back in the day when I played Doom, you used the keyboard, but still, you get my point. But when you factor just how different the basic systems I just went over can be used in different games, adding more mechanics or design layers on top of that makes games stand out even more. Because when I think of innovations in movement systems for FPS games, I think for most of us, we'll think of like Titanfall, maybe the newer Doom titles, but there are other ways of using movement systems to interact with different mechanics in the game. For example, do you limp or go prone when you get shot in the legs like in Escape from Tarkov? Can you lean in and out of cover and sprint the same way you can do it in Call of Duty or Battlefield? How high can you jump? Can you double jump like in the new Doom games? Can you walk slowly to lower the sound of your footsteps like in Viet Cong? I can go on forever on this, but you get the point. Movement is the foundation that holds the entirety of the FPS genre. There will always be exceptions with unique mechanics and designs, but since FPS games are closest to our real-life perception, it's also much more difficult to get right, not to mention innovate upon. There are two additional behaviors that relate to the movement system that I've yet to talk about because they require special attention. Let's start with the first one that really caught me by surprise, which is auto climb. I mean, after we played with Grandy and all the guys on Ace of Spades, I think it was the beta, there was no auto climb, and I wanted to fucking kill myself from how janky it all felt. I was so sure that it was the lack of auto climb that I didn't even consider for a second not to implement a system. It's so obvious, right? Well, after a few weeks of playing with auto climb in our engine, I realized that it was never the auto climb. It was that dizzying, almost gliding movement of Ace of Spades when you look down and it felt like you're completely hammered. So after figuring out the basic movement systems and playing with auto climb, it just felt wrong. It made every hill into an escalator. And then I realized that that's not really something you want in a game that's all about smaller maps and terrain manipulation. That's when it hit me. It was never the auto climb. It was just the basic movement system. Now, there might be exceptions to this rule. When we add water voxels, most likely when you reach the edge of a riverbank, I'm gonna let you auto climb out of the water because jumping outside of the water isn't really a satisfying way of exiting the water, if you ask me. That's why testing is so important, because it made me realize something about the design of Born to Build. Every voxel counts. I can do an entire devlog on that rule alone, but that's really at the core of the game. If I want you to build a fortification, some kind of wall, whatever you want to call it, a bunker, if I give the enemy or all other players the option to just easily scale up, create a quick flight of stairs and just auto climb their way up, it's negating the work that you've put in, and it also makes the terrain feel less impactful, and I don't want that. The maps are too small to have that kind of rule. And that's what I love about game design. It changes when you test it. It was for years clear to me that we're going to have an auto climb, and now that I've tested it, I realized that's not going to happen. The second mechanic I want to discuss is sprinting. I'm going to show you two examples. I need you to get into the headspace of this is an active map. There are enemies moving around you. You hear them shooting, you don't see them yet. You need to cross the river. Let's look at this first clip with sprinting. I'm going to add the alt movement to be a sprint, and I'm going to cross the river. Take a look. All right, now let's do it without sprint, just the basic movement system. I think you can guess what I'm getting at. If I want you to feel the danger, if I want you to consider the terrain, and I want you to dig, and I want you to build, you need to feel exposed. And it's a multiplayer game, you get to respawn. So dying isn't that big a deal in a way. But if I want you to take care of your ass, I want to reinforce the feeling that you need to stay in cover. Then if I give you players the option to sprint, you're more likely just take the risk and go for it rather than maybe considering to block off a certain area, maybe create a tunnel, manipulate the environment in a way that can benefit you and the team for the entire match. See what I'm getting at? Everything that you add, just adding the movement system, because we added the digging and the building, the alt movement, the main movement, jumping, falling, physics, all of these systems have to come together and reinforce what the game is all about. It needs a lot of TLC when you start considering netcode, server buffers, and latency compensation, and a whole bunch of fun systems. Think about it like this. You know how every FPS game you ever played feels, because that's what we do for the most of our time as players. It's what makes the first person actually work, at least from the camera perspective. And think how much the movement is tied to the game engines. We all know how Source games feel to move in them, right? Counter-Strike, Half-Life, Team Fortress, the way their physics system works, the way Unreal works, even if you change the values, just the way these engines handle the movement and the physics is so crucial to the way the game feels. You can spend hours, if not years, tweaking these kind of systems. So they really are important. I also really believe in setting restrictions. This entire game, in a way, aside from, just taking the really monumental task of developing a game engine, really set a extremely restrictive line when it comes to what needs to be in this game, because we all play Ace of Spades. We know what we want to get out of this title. So because it's taking us long, I think the game itself will benefit from that in the long run. I really do. So yeah, I think we can all raise a toast and say, well, Born to Build is playable. It's just not a fun game yet. I mean, it is fun for us to tweak and move around the levels, but there's still a lot to be done. If you want to see how the game is progressing and what's left, I've added a timeline to our website. It generalizes a few things, obviously. It condenses our development into these little highlights, but we're really narrowing it down to the few final systems before we're already starting to implement netcode. Writing this script really took me a while because I didn't know where to begin, because I can talk for hours about gameplay systems, but I needed to make this as interesting as I can, hopefully. I hope you're excited as we are. It's really coming together beautifully, and it's, it's getting there. We're already playing the game in a way. It's just not the entire experience, so it's really, truly exciting for us. Before I sign off on this debriefing, soldiers, I'm just going to let you know I'm going to be AWOL for about a month, taking a little R&R for a honeymoon, which, if you don't mind, I need a little bit of a break from work, not from this project. It's going to be the most I've ever been away not working on Born to Build, so I won't be on Discord as much, but I'm hoping to come back refreshed and energized and ready to work on the next devlog, which is going to be an exciting topic that I don't want to reveal just yet, but it's going to be good. I've got so much more on the way for you guys, and I just can't wait to get it all out there already. And some of you asked for more podcast episodes, so I had a nice talk with Amir. It should go live within the next few days. I've scheduled it to, have the devlog do its thing. So if you want to hear me and Amir talk about what the last year has been like for us, we'd love for you to join us there on the Night Patrol podcast. People will have to guess what we're drinking. I knew this would happen. So thanks again for your patience, soldiers. We'll be in touch soon. All right, let's get the fuck out of here.
We got red smoke on it. Where the hell are you at? I'm right behind you. Roger that.